The Galactic Academy of Interstellar Navigation stood on a moon orbiting a dead world, and every cycle it sent its senior cadets to prove themselves on hostile planets. This was tradition. This was how the galaxy separated the capable from the merely educated. The rankings went from Class 1, which meant mild discomfort, all the way to Class 10, which meant certain death. Class 7 worlds sat in that terrible middle ground where survival was possible but unlikely, where even trained soldiers came back changed or did not come back at all. Commander stood before the 5 cadets in the briefing room and felt the familiar weight of sending young beings to their potential deaths. He was tall and gray-skinned with 4 arms folded behind his back, and he had given this briefing 47 times. Not all of those cadets had returned. The 5 before him represented the diversity of the Galactic Union, clicked his mandibles nervously, his body shimmering under the artificial lights. They were known for their analytical minds and their complete inability to handle temperature extremes. Beside him sat a house, whose blue-scaled skin required constant moisture. She wore a humidity suit that covered her from neck to toe, and without it she would dry out and die within hours. Took up 2 seats with his massive frame, his natural armor plates shifting as he breathed. His species had evolved as apex predators, but their slow metabolism made them vulnerable to cold. Perched delicately on her chair, hollow bones and feathered arms marking her as her people could see for miles and fly on there, but those same hollow bones broke easily under stress. And then there was Danny. The human sat slightly apart from the others, not because they had excluded him, but because his chair was designed for smaller species. He was 22 years old with dark hair and an easy smile that had not left his face since he walked into the room. He came from a colony called New Montana, which knew nothing about except that it was a human agricultural settlement on the edge of explored space. The other cadets had spent the past 3 years quietly looking down on him. Humans were new to the galactic community. Their ships were primitive. They were short. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities that anyone could see. Activated the holographic display, and a planet appeared in the center of the room. It was brown and green and covered in swirling storms that lit up with internal lightning. 9, said. Class 7. Surface temperature ranges from -40 to +60 standard degrees depending on latitude and season. The atmosphere is breathable but contains trace elements that will cause respiratory distress after prolonged exposure. Native fauna includes approximately 300 species classified as extremely dangerous. Vegetation is 60% toxic to most known biology. Electromagnetic storms occur every 3 to 5 days and will disable your equipment within hours of landing. He watched their faces, had gone still, running calculations behind his compound eyes, gripped the arms of her chair. His tail twitched against the floor. Feathers flattened against her skull in a display of fear. Danny leaned forward with what looked like interest. Your survival kits contain basic tools, emergency rations for 5 days, medical supplies, and 1 emergency beacon that will function for approximately 6 hours before the electromagnetic interference destroys it. Use it only if absolutely necessary. Pickup is scheduled for 30 standard days from your landing. You are expected to survive using your training, your intelligence, and each other. Paused, looking at each of them in turn. I will be honest with you. Class 7 assessments have a 43% fatality rate. You are not expected to complete any specific objectives. You are expected only to survive. If all 5 of you return alive, it will be considered an exceptional outcome. The room was silent. Then Danny raised his hand. Sir, what's the weather like this time of year? Stared at him. In 47 briefings, no cadet had ever asked about the weather. Variable, he said finally. Expect extremes. Cool, should I pack sunscreen? Made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been despair. Could not tell which. 3 hours later, they boarded the drop shuttle and descended through the atmosphere of 9. The ride was rough, the small craft shaking and bucking as it passed through layers of turbulent air. Through the tiny windows, they could see the sky turn from black to purple to a sick copper color that none of them had ever seen before. Was praying quietly in her native language, had closed his eyes and gripped his restraints hard enough to dent the metal. Feathers stood on end, making her look twice her normal size. Recited survival statistics under his breath, and the numbers were not encouraging. Danny looked out the window and said, "Huh, pretty." The shuttle landed in a clearing surrounded by forest. The trees were tall and twisted, their leaves edged with what looked like metal. Everything was the wrong color. The sky pressed down on them like a bruise, and the air smelled like copper and rot. They had 6 hours before the first storm hit. Danny was the first one out of the shuttle, and he stood in the alien clearing with his hands on his hips, breathing deep. The others emerged behind him, already checking their equipment, already calculating how long their supplies would last. "Okay," Danny said to no one in particular. "First things first, we need shelter, water, and fire. Storms coming in a few hours based on those clouds. Let's move." Looked at him with something between confusion and contempt. "You are taking charge." "Someone has to. You want to stand here and argue about rank, or you want to not die." There was a moment of silence, then clicked his mandibles and said, "The human makes a valid point. We can establish hierarchy after we establish survival." They moved. What none of them knew, what the Galactic Academy had somehow failed to note in any of their assessments, was that Earth itself was classified as a Class 12 by galactic standards. The planet where Danny had spent his childhood was more hostile than the one they now stood on. He had grown up with hurricanes and earthquakes, with predators and parasites, with a biosphere that had been trying to kill his species for 4 million years. To Danny, 9 felt like a vacation. He did not tell them this. He simply started gathering materials for shelter, testing the soil, looking for signs of water. He worked with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this before, many times, in places far more dangerous than his could imagine. Above them, the first storm clouds began to gather, and lightning flickered in the distance like a warning. The first night on 9 taught them what fear really meant. Danny had found a rocky outcrop with a natural overhang, and they had spent the remaining daylight hours making it into something like a camp. He showed them how to pile stones into a windbreak, how to gather dry material for bedding, how to dig a fire pit that would contain the flames and reflect heat back toward them. The others watched and helped and said little, still processing the reality of their situation. When darkness fell, it fell completely. The copper sky turned black, and the stars were hidden by clouds that rumbled with distant thunder. The temperature dropped 30 degrees in less than an hour. Slowed almost immediately. His reptilian metabolism depended on external heat, and without it his movements became sluggish, and his thoughts grew confused. He curled into a ball near the fire that Danny had somehow coaxed into existence using nothing but friction and determination. "How did you do that?" asked, watching the flames dance. "Make fire from nothing." "Not nothing. Dry wood, patience, and a lot of rubbing. Humans figured this out about 1 million years ago. It's kind of our thing." Was recording everything in the small that still functioned, though its display flickered with interference. "Your species has no natural advantages. No armor, no claws, no venom, no environmental adaptations of note. Yet you mastered fire before you mastered agriculture." "We had to. Everything on our planet wanted to eat us, still does actually. Fire keeps the predators away." As if summoned by his words, the night erupted with sound. Something was moving in the forest. Multiple somethings, judging by the crashes and snaps of breaking branches. They were big and they were fast and they were getting closer. Saw them first. Her vision cut through the darkness where the others were blind, and what she saw made her cry out in terror. 6-legged creatures, 4 of them. No 6, they are circling us. Danny grabbed a burning branch from the fire and stood at the edge of their camp. The light pushed back the darkness just enough to reveal eyes reflecting the flames. Too many eyes. The creatures were low and long and covered in what looked like thorns, and their mouths split open in 3 directions to show teeth that went all the way down their throats. "Thornbacks," whispered, his analytical mind still working even through the fear. "Apex pack hunters. They should not be active at night. They should not be here." "Well, they are. Everybody stay behind me and stay close to the fire." One of the thornbacks rushed forward, testing their defenses. Danny swung the burning branch and caught it across the snout. The creature screamed, a sound like metal scraping against metal, and retreated. But the others did not retreat. They spread out looking for weaknesses. Tried to rise, tried to fight, but his cold, slowed body would not obey him. Had no combat training whatsoever. Her people were traders and diplomats, not warriors. Could see the danger but could do nothing about it, and was calculating odds that grew worse by the second. The attack came from 3 directions at once. Danny moved faster than any of them expected. He threw the burning branch at the lead thornback and grabbed another from the fire in the same motion. He kicked stones into the face of a second attacker and shouted, a wordless human war cry that echoed off the rocks and made the creatures hesitate for just a moment. It was not enough. One of them got past him and slammed into, thorns tearing at his armored hide. Another leaped for, and she threw herself backward but not far enough. The impact broke her wing arm with a crack that everyone heard. Danny was there before she hit the ground. He brought the burning branch down on the thornback's head with all his strength, once, twice, 3 times until it stopped moving. Then he turned and drove the fire into the one attacking, shoving it back into the darkness. "The fire," he shouted. "Make it bigger, throw everything on it." Understood first. She grabbed armfuls of the dry material they had gathered for bedding and hurled it onto the flames. The fire roared up, throwing light and heat in a wide circle. The remaining thornbacks screamed and fled into the forest. Silence fell, broken only by heavy breathing and quiet sounds of pain. Danny knelt beside her in the firelight. Her wing arm was bent at an angle that wing arms should not bend. She was shaking, feathers slick with sweat, eyes wide with shock. "This is going to hurt," he said gently, "but I have to set it or it will heal wrong. Do you understand?" She nodded, unable to speak. He worked quickly and carefully, doing things he had learned from his grandmother, who had spent 40 years as a field medic on the frontier. Screamed once and then passed out, which was probably for the best. He splinted the break with straight sticks and strips torn from his own shirt, then covered her with his jacket and sat back on his heels. Was staring at him. "Where did you learn to do that?" "New Montana, frontier colony. People got hurt all the time. You learned to fix things or people died." "And the fighting, you fought like you have done this before." Danny checked on, who was bleeding from a dozen small wounds but nothing fatal. He checked the fire, added more fuel, and finally sat down between the injured and the flames. "When I was 12, I got lost in the wilderness for 9 days. Mountains, forests, predators. No equipment, no help, nothing but what I could find and make. When they found me, I was 20 miles from where I started and I had built a shelter, caught food, and made a weapon out of rock and bone. My dad said the universe is always trying to kill you, so you might as well learn how to make it work for its dinner." The others were quiet for a long time. "Your planet," said slowly, "what class is it rated?" "I don't know. Why?" "Because if this is how you respond to a Class 7 world, I suspect yours is something far worse." Danny laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that seemed wrong in this place of death and darkness. "Earth? Yeah, I guess it's pretty rough. Earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanoes, tsunamis. Half the plants and animals can kill you. The weather changes fast enough to kill the unprepared, but it's home, you know, you get used to it." Looked at the fire, at the darkness beyond, at the human who sat between them and death with nothing but calm competence. "I think," she said quietly, "we have been underestimating your species." Danny shrugged and poked the fire with a stick. "That's okay, everyone does." By morning, his fever had broken, was moving again as the sun warmed his blood, and Danny was already planning their next move, pointing toward distant hills where he said they would find better shelter and water. He was starting to tan from the alien sun, and he did not seem to notice. 10 days into their survival assessment, Danny went looking for fresh water and came back with a monster. The journey to the hills had taken 5 days of careful travel. Danny led them through the hostile landscape with a patience that amazed his companions. He tested plants before letting anyone touch them. He watched the behavior of small animals to learn which water sources were safe. He found paths through the razor-leafed forests that minimized their exposure to danger. His humidity suit had been damaged in the thornback attack. Danny repaired it with tree resin and strips of fabric from his dwindling supply of clothing. He was down to a torn undershirt and his trousers, but he did not complain. He simply kept moving, kept working, kept them all alive. They found caves in the hills, exactly as Danny had predicted. The openings were large enough to defend but small enough to heat with their fires. Fresh water flowed from somewhere deep in the rock, emerging in a clear pool that tested safe for all of them. For the first time since landing, they had something like security. "I need to explore these caves," Danny said on the morning of the 10th day. "There might be other entrances, might be other creatures living deeper in. I should know what we're dealing with." Offered to come with him, but Danny shook his head. "Your eyes don't work well in the dark. Mine adjust. I'll be back before the light changes." He took a torch and disappeared into the blackness. The cave system was larger than it appeared from outside. Tunnels branched off in multiple directions, some leading up toward light, others descending into depths that felt wrong. Danny moved carefully, leaving marks on the walls so he could find his way back. He had explored caves before, on New Montana and on Earth during a childhood trip he still remembered fondly. It was in the deepest part of his exploration that he heard the sound. It was not a growl exactly. It was more like a whimper, something small and hurt and afraid. Danny froze, torch held high, listening. The sound came again, and this time he could tell it was coming from a side tunnel that had been half blocked by a recent rockslide. Common sense said to leave it alone. Academy protocol said to avoid unknown fauna. Every survival instinct said that sounds in dark caves were things you walked away from. Danny went toward it anyway. The side tunnel opened into a small chamber lit by a crack in the ceiling that let in pale daylight. The rockslide had come from that crack, stones and debris piled in the center of the space. And there, half buried under the rubble, was a creature. Danny recognized it from the Academy database, and his blood went cold. It was a juvenile, judging by its size, but still big enough to kill him without effort. The species was classified as a Class-7 apex predator, the most dangerous thing on a world full of dangerous things. Adults grew to 30 feet long and had been known to destroy armored vehicles for fun. Even juveniles were considered kill-on-sight threats. This one was the size of a large dog. 6 legs, 4 of them visible and 2 trapped under stones. Black scales that seemed to drink the light. A head that was mostly mouth, currently closed and pressed against the ground in pain. And eyes, 2 of them, large and golden, and looking directly at Danny with something that might have been fear. One of its rear legs was crushed under a boulder too heavy for it to move. Danny stood there for a long time, torch flickering, thinking about everything he had been taught and everything he believed. The creature watched him. It did not growl or snap or try to attack. It just watched and made that small hurt sound again. "Well," Danny said out loud, "this is probably a terrible idea." He put down his torch and began moving rocks. It took 3 hours. The watched him the entire time, occasionally whimpering when he shifted weight near its trapped limb. Danny talked to it while he worked. The way he had talked to injured animals back home, keeping his voice low and steady and calm. "Easy there, I know it hurts. Just hang on a little longer, almost got it. You're going to be okay." When the last stone came free, the creature pulled its leg loose and tried to stand. It collapsed immediately, the damaged limb unable to support its weight. Danny moved slowly toward it, hands up and open, expecting death at any moment. The sniffed his hand. Its tongue, which was black and forked and looked capable of stripping flesh from bone, licked his palm gently. "Okay," Danny said. "Okay, that's not what I expected." He examined the leg. Badly bruised, possibly fractured, but not destroyed. With time and care, it might heal. The creature let him touch it, let him probe the injury, let him wrap it in strips of cloth from his already reduced clothing. When he stood up to leave, the followed him. It limped after him through the tunnels, staying close to his heels, making small sounds that were almost like purring. When they emerged into the daylight of their camp, the others screamed. "Don't panic," Danny said calmly. "She's friendly." "That is us," said, his voice higher than Danny had ever heard it. "That is an apex predator. That is death incarnate. Her name is Midnight, and she's hurt and scared and alone. She probably lost her family in the rockslide that trapped her. I'm not leaving her." Had grabbed a spear they had made for hunting. "You cannot be serious. One bite from that thing and you're dead. One bite from that thing and we're all dead." Danny knelt beside and it pressed its head against his chest. He scratched behind what might have been ears, and the purring sound grew louder. "Look at her, she's just a baby. She doesn't want to hurt anyone. She's just scared and alone, and I know what that feels like." Stepped forward slowly. She had spent her life reading people and situations, and what she read now was something she had never seen before. The most dangerous creature on the planet was nuzzling the human like a pet. "How?" she asked. "How is this possible?" "I don't know, maybe she knows I helped her. Maybe she imprinted on me because I was kind to her. Maybe humans and have something in common that nobody figured out before. I don't know and I don't care. She's staying." Midnight looked at the others with those golden eyes, and then she yawned, showing rows of teeth that could bite through metal. Then she curled up at Danny's feet and went asleep. Over the following days, she proved her worth 100 times over. Her senses were sharper than anything they had. She warned them of approaching predators long before could spot them. She led them to water sources and food sources that they would never have found alone. She hunted for them, bringing back small animals that she dropped at Danny's feet like offerings. And at night, she curled up next to him and kept him warm, and made that sound that was definitely purring. "Your species," said one evening, watching Danny groom Midnight's scales. "You do not simply survive. You make allies of everything. You find connections in the strangest places." Danny smiled and kept grooming. "Humans have been doing this for thousands of years. Wolves became dogs. Cats became partners. We find things that should eat us and turn them into family. It's just what we do." Midnight opened one golden eye, looked at and purred louder. The storm came on the 18th day, and it was nothing like the others they had survived. Midnight sensed it first. She had been restless all morning, packing the cave entrance and making sounds that Danny had learned to recognize as warnings. The sky changed from its usual copper to a deep purple that seemed to pulse with its own internal light. The air grew heavy and hot and thick with electricity. "We need to go deeper," Danny said. "This is going to be bad." They gathered everything they could carry and retreated into the cave system, past the main chamber, past the pool of fresh water, into a secondary cavern that Danny had mapped during his explorations. It was small and uncomfortable, but it was deep enough that the storm might not reach them. The storm hit like a physical blow. Even underground, they could hear it. Thunder that shook the stone around them. Lightning that turned the distant cave entrance into a strobe of blinding light. The electromagnetic interference was so strong that it died with a final spark and never came back on. The temperature dropped, then spiked, then dropped again as the storm dragged different air masses across the land above them. They huddled together in the darkness, 5 cadets in one, waiting for it to end. It did not end. For 4 days the storm raged. They had brought water and food, but not enough for 4 days. By the second day they were rationing. By the third day they were hungry and scared and starting to break. Developed a fungal infection in her gill slits, a consequence of the damaged humidity suit and the damp cave air. The infection spread fast, turning the delicate tissue gray and making each breath a struggle. She needed medication they did not have, clean air they could not provide, sunlight that was blocked by the endless storm above. Entered torpor on the third day. His species could not handle the cold that had seeped into the deep caves, and his body shut down to conserve energy. He was alive but unresponsive, curled into a ball with his carapace drawn tight around his vital organs. His metabolism slowed to dangerous levels. Without external heat, his body could not function properly. He was conscious but barely, speaking in single words when he spoke at all, unable to move or help or even stay warm on his own. His wing arm had healed enough that she could move it, but the fear and exhaustion had taken something out of her that she could not get back. She sat in the corner of the cave and stared at nothing, and when Danny spoke to her, she answered in whispers. Danny did not sleep. For 3 days and nights, he moved through the darkness with only touch and memory to guide him. He kept fires burning with wood they had stored, small fires that gave off more smoke than heat but were better than nothing. He rationed his own food and gave it to the others, eating only enough to keep himself functional. He cleaned infected gills with water and cloth, over and over, fighting the fungus with nothing but stubbornness. He wrapped himself around to share body heat. He dragged closer to the fire and built reflectors out of stones to direct more warmth toward him. And he talked. In the endless darkness, with the storm howling overhead, Danny told them stories. He told them about Earth, about the ice ages that had nearly killed his ancestors, and how they had survived by moving and adapting and never giving up. About the mountains that humans had climbed simply because they were there, losing fingers and toes and lives but reaching the top anyway. About the deserts they had crossed and the oceans they had sailed, and the places they had gone where no reasonable creature would go. He told them about his own life, about New Montana and its hostile wilderness, about the 9 days he had spent lost as a child, about his grandmother who had saved 1,000 lives with nothing but skill and determination, about his father who worked 16-hour days to make the colony survive, about his mother who grew crops in soil that should have been barren, about a whole community of humans who had looked at an empty world and decided to make it home. He told them about hope. On Earth, he said, his voice hoarse from talking and thirst, there's a story about a woman who sailed alone around the world. She was caught in a storm that lasted 5 days. Her boat was damaged, her supplies were gone, and she was sure she was going to die. But she didn't. She kept sailing, kept repairing, kept believing that she would make it. And she did. She sailed into port after 2 years alone on the ocean, and when they asked her how she survived, she said she just never stopped trying. His breathing was shallow, but she was listening. Danny could see her eyes reflecting the firelight. Humans don't give up. It's not that we're brave or strong or special. It's that we're too stubborn to know when we're supposed to die. The universe has been trying to kill us since the day we evolved, and our answer has always been the same. Not today. Maybe tomorrow, but not today. On the 4th day, Midnight suddenly raised her head and made a sound Danny had not heard before. It was not a warning. It was something lighter, something almost joyful. "What is it, girl?" She bounded toward the cave entrance, limping slightly on her healing leg, and Danny followed. The light was different now. The purple had faded. The thunder had stopped. He climbed toward the entrance and emerged into a world washed clean by the storm. The sky was pale blue, a color he had not seen since arriving on this planet. The air was fresh and cool and carried the scent of living things. In the distance, something that might have been a bird called out, the first natural sound besides the storm that they had heard in days. Danny stood in the sunlight and breathed deep. Then he went back into the cave to carry his out one by one. It took him 6 hours to move them all. Had to be carried on his back for nearly a mile to reach a sunny spot where the stone had absorbed enough heat to revive him. Could barely walk and had to lean on Danny's shoulder the entire way. Needed help climbing even small rocks. Followed in silence, her eyes slowly coming back to life as the sunlight touched her feathers. By evening, they were all outside, gathered around a fire that Danny had built in a sheltered spot. The storm had destroyed their original camp, but they were alive. They had made it. His analytical mind had recovered enough to function, and the first thing he did was run numbers. Our survival probability during that storm was less than 5% given available resources and conditions. We should have died. Danny looked at him across the fire, but we didn't. No, we did not because of you. Because of us, I couldn't have done it alone. Laughed, a weak sound but genuine. You carried us, literally carried us. For 3 days you did not sleep. You gave us your food. You kept us alive when we had given up. Danny shrugged and scratched Midnight behind her ears. That's what you do for crew. Spoke for the first time in days. Her voice was rough and her words came slowly, but there was something in her eyes that had not been there before. We mocked you. For 3 years at the academy we looked down on humans. We thought you were primitive and weak and limited, but you are none of those things. You are survivors. You are protectors. You do not give up. Danny smiled, and the alien sun caught his deeply tanned face, making him look like he belonged on this, like he had been made for places exactly like this. Welcome to how humans see the universe, he said. It's trying to kill you. Always has been, always will be. The trick is to keep going anyway. 5 days of their assessment remained. For the first time, everyone believed they would make it. The pickup shuttle descended through clear skies on the 30th day, and Commander prepared himself for what he would find. In 47 previous assessments, he had seen everything. He had seen cadets who returned as heroes and cadets who returned as broken shells. He had seen crews torn apart by conflict and crews bound together by shared trauma. He had landed on planets where bodies waited to be recovered and planets where nothing waited at all. He had never seen what was waiting for him on 9. The shuttle touched down in a clearing that had been carefully prepared. Stones had been arranged to mark the landing zone. A fire pit showed signs of long use. And there, sitting on a flat rock in the middle of the clearing, was a human with a sleeping in his lap. Stopped at the bottom of the ramp and stared. Danny looked up and smiled. His skin was deeply tanned from 30 days under an alien sun. His clothes were torn and patched and barely holding together. He was thinner than he had been, and there were new scars on his arms and hands that told stories of fights survived. But his eyes were bright and his posture was relaxed, and he was scratching a Class-7 apex predator behind the ears like it was a pet dog. Commander, Danny said, good to see you. Cadet, is that a? Her name is Midnight, sir. She's coming with us. Before could respond, the other cadets emerged from the tree line. They moved differently than they had 30 days ago. They moved like people who had seen death and walked away from it, like people who had learned something important about themselves and the universe. Came first, his carapace marked with scratches and scars that would take months to fade. Behind him came, her humidity suit a patchwork of repairs that should not have worked but clearly did. Followed, his armored hide bearing new patterns where wounds had healed. And finally, her splinted wing arm held close to her body, her feathers bright with health despite everything she had been through. All 5 cadets were alive. Had been doing this job for 30 years. He had trained thousands of cadets from dozens of species. He had seen bravery and cowardice, genius and foolishness, triumph, and tragedy. But he had never seen all 5 cadets from a Class-7 assessment return alive. "Report," he said, his voice carefully neutral. The other cadets looked at Danny. Without discussion, without argument, they had decided that he would speak for them. Day 1, we established a base camp and survived our first Thornback attack. Days 2 through 5, we relocated to more defensible caves in the hills. Day 10, I found and rescued a juvenile that had been trapped in a rock slide. Days 18 through 22, we survived a superstorm that lasted 4 days. Days 23 through 30, we recovered and prepared for extraction. No casualties, no fatalities, mission complete. Looked at the human, at the creature in his lap, at the other cadets who stood around him like an honor guard. "You befriended a..." "Yes, sir. She saved our lives several times, warned us about predators, found water sources, hunted for us when we couldn't hunt for ourselves. She's earned her place with us. Are classified as hostile fauna. Protocol requires their termination on site." Danny's smile did not waver, but something in his eyes changed. Something old and hard and absolutely certain. "With respect, sir, I will not allow anyone to harm her. She is under my protection." There was a moment of silence. Then one by one the other cadets moved to stand beside Danny, positioned himself at Danny's right, took his left, stood behind him, massive and immovable, small and wounded but fierce, completed the formation. "Midnight is part of our crew," said. "She comes with us." Looked at them for a long time. He had trained cadets from species that had been part of the Galactic Union for thousands of years. He had seen the best that the galaxy had to offer. And here, on a that killed nearly half of those sent to it, he was looking at something new. He was looking at a crew. "Get on the shuttle," he said finally. "All of you, including the..." The journey back to the academy took 3 days. In that time, conducted individual interviews with each cadet, gathering information for his report. The stories they told were consistent in their details but varied in their perspectives. Spoke of probability and analysis, of survival calculations that had been wrong from the start because they failed to account for the human variable. He spoke of watching Danny work through problems with a combination of instinct and experience that no training could replicate. Spoke of leadership and care, of a human who had given away his own clothing and food to keep others alive. She spoke of having her damaged equipment repaired with materials that should not have worked, held together by nothing but human stubbornness and creativity. Spoke of strength, not the physical strength that his species valued, but a different kind entirely. He spoke of being carried when he could not walk, of being kept warm when his cold blood tried to kill him, of being treated as worth saving when he had given up on himself. Spoke of hope. She spoke of the darkness of the cave and the stories Danny had told, of human history that was a long record of refusing to die. She spoke of deciding to live because a human had decided that she would. And Danny spoke of his. He spoke of quick thinking and analytical mind, of courage and determination, of strength when it was needed, of vision and heart. He spoke of them like they had saved him rather than the other way around. Filed his report on the day they returned to the academy. It was read by the commandant, then by the board of directors, then by officials in the Galactic Union government who had never paid attention to survival assessments before. The report was comprehensive. It detailed every day of the assessment, every challenge faced and overcome, every moment when the crew should have died but did not. It included analysis and recommendations and projections for future training protocols. But it was the final paragraph that entered galactic legend. Recommend immediate reclassification of human survival capabilities. Previous assessments were catastrophically optimistic regarding their limitations. Humans do not merely survive hostile environments. They adapt to them, thrive in them, and find ways to make allies of the very things that should kill them. Recommend that all future assessments involving human cadets be evaluated with this in mind. Further recommend that we never send humans to assessments unless we are prepared for them to return with souvenirs, stories, and creatures that have decided to follow them home. Danny graduated at the top of his class that year. Midnight was granted special status as a service animal after a thorough evaluation proved she was completely loyal to her human. The other cadets from his survival team requested transfers to serve with him when they received their first assignments. On the day Danny received his commission as a full officer in the Galactic Navigation Corps, a journalist asked him what he had learned on 9. He thought about the question for a long time. He thought about the thornbacks and the storms and the endless nights of keeping others alive. He thought about Midnight and how she had trusted him when every instinct should have told her to kill. He thought about his, who had started as strangers and become family. I learned that humans aren't special because we're the strongest or the most advanced, he said finally. We're special because we don't give up. We're special because we look at things that want to kill us and see potential friends. We're special because we love hard and fight harder and never stop believing that tomorrow will be better than today. He smiled, and Midnight made her purring sound from her place at his side. The universe is trying to kill us all. It always has been. Humans just decided a long time ago that we'd face it together, and somewhere along the way, we got pretty good at bringing others along for the ride. Behind him, N stood in their dress uniforms, ready for whatever came next. They had gone to Class-7 as strangers. They had returned as something far more important. They had returned as crew.